core values are treating children like children, and they believe that youth should be better equipped to respond to challenges as a result of their justice involvement. And that any justice involvement should be rare, fair, and brief. So you'll see here on the slide, Liz Ryan. She's the former OJJDP administrator. She was a special guest at our commission meeting last August, and she reminded all of us that their office was created in the spirit of law enforcement, supporting our law enforcement partners and also working together with them to create safer communities. I know this is a busy slide. There's a lot going on here. What I want to highlight, though, is that the Act celebrated its 50th birthday last year. Tennessee's been a participating state for a long time, and that these Title II federal formula grant programs have also been around, pardon me, since inception. So we're going to briefly review the core requirements that underlie the majority of TCCY's compliance monitoring activities. And that's going to be the deinstitutionalization of status offenders, or DSO, sight and sound separation, jail removal, and addressing racial and ethnic disparities, or RAD. So if, as a state, we stay in compliance with these 4 requirements, we pass go. We receive several $100,000, and we use that money to pass it through directly to programs that benefit youth in their communities. And we'll talk more about that on a later slide. So deinstitutionalization of status offenders, it's a lot to say. DSO really just means that youth should not be placed in settings for engaging in status offenses. Those are only crimes because of the youth's age. So you're breaking curfew, skipping or being absent from school without permission, having tobacco or e-cigarettes, and I always say vapes, not dabs, being away from home without a legal guardian's permission, or being unruly. And so here we note that alcohol and tobacco requirements, both age 21, but youth in possession of tobacco are status offenders. Youth in possession of alcohol are delinquent or misdemeanor offenders, and that's because the higher the risk of harm, the more serious the charge. So every good rule has exceptions, so we're going to look at 4 exceptions here. There's the violation of the Youth Handgun Safety Act, that's federal legislation. In Tennessee, youth can only be in possession of a handgun within few and fixed limits. So anyone under age 21 charged with handgun possession, they can be charged as a delinquent offender and held in excess of the 24-hour rule. Same with youth who have violated a valid court order, but again, we'll go into more detail about that later. The Interstate Compact on Juveniles, or ICJ, that's a nationwide agreement on the handling and processing of youth who are out of state without permission. And these are coordinated by DCS's Office of Juvenile Justice. And it basically just says that youth have to be held in accordance with the rules of the compact to avoid those compliance monitoring violations. So here at the bottom, you'll see previously, there had been a provision of the Act that allowed youth to be detained in state facilities under federal or sovereign authority. If they weren't charged with a crime, but if they were undocumented or otherwise not a U.S. citizen. That is no longer the case. And detaining any youth who's a non-offender, whether they're undocumented or already adjudicated or DNN, that's going to be a violation of the DSO requirement. All right, so Tennessee uses the valid court order exception for status offenders. Reauthorization of the act might phase this out by 2028, but currently it sets a pretty strict and detailed list of requirements for a youth who's already under court supervision for status offenses in the event they are subsequently detained or confined for a status offense. So these procedures, like I said, they are pretty strict and they're very detailed. So the majority of our courts don't use them. And nationwide, the majority of states don't use them, but they are allowed in Tennessee. So for example, if a youth is on probation for truancy, and they are picked up at the Sonic with their cherry limeade and it's 10:30 on a school day, if they're taken to a detention facility, they're booked in, the court has 24 hours to release them or to follow this established process. So it requires that the court have a probable cause hearing, or that probable cause is determined. that the youth receive within 24 hours an in-person mental health assessment from a qualified individual that identifies their immediate needs, that within 48 hours, those needs are reported in writing to the judge, and then the judge has to create a release plan that incorporates those needs. All of that has to be done, like I said, within that 48-hour timeline. State statute allows for 72 hours. But because we monitor for federal requirements, we monitor for the more stringent requirements. And that does say that youth can't be confined for more than 7 days after their initial court order unless they have a subsequent non-status offense charge, like a misdemeanor charge. So here, sometimes I do also note that, for example, if a youth is warned on the record, mark well, if you skip school again, you will return to juvenile detention Friday 9 p.m. to Sunday 9 p.m. for 3 consecutive weekends. That could be allowed if it was in the judge's order, if the youth was warned in writing and warned on the record. And as long as those periods of detention didn't exceed 7 days. However, after that period, Markwell could not go back to secure detention for that status offense. All right, so here we talked about a risk and needs assessment. And so consistent with their state statute and federal statute, here we talk about the JJ cans, and this is sort of the radar or the instrument that Tennessee uses. I got kind of curious, how did we arrive with the JJ cans? So I went back and looked at it. In 2009, Mental Health and the AOC, or the Administrative Office of the Courts, they received a Bureau of Justice Assistance grant, and that was just to implement a juvenile court screening project because they had this large oversight goal of increasing diversion opportunities and using this radar to help inform service and treatment plans, especially for mental health and substance abuse. All right, so if you are a YSO, you are probably well familiar with the JJ cans. The training is provided by Vanderbilt Center for Excellence. It's co-led by the executive director and the Office of Forensic and Juvenile Court Services at Mental Health. The AOC still coordinates these trainings, so if you are not trained on the JJ cans already, you can contact Ryan Graham at the AOC, and he's sort of in charge of getting that scheduled. Actually, that runs into ICJ, but I'm going to go back here to the JJ cans for just a moment because I think if you're not familiar with it, so this is a validated, evidence-based 30-question screener, and it yields rates of urgency or rates needs on a 4-point scale. So 0 to 3 is none to immediate. And so gauging that risk of reoffending behaviors helps YSOs structure those supports in line with the risk needs response best practice model. There's also an opportunity within the JJ cans. There's a subsection that sort of helps identify whether a youth is poses an elopement risk or if they have heightened risk for being the victim of human trafficking. Normally, this is administered by YSOs because most courts don't have mental health staff, or they might have a master social work intern, but really making sure all of our YSOs are as well prepared to respond to those needs as possible is important.
So Teresa, can you go back to that slide for just a second?
This one?
So the contact at the bottom is who they need to contact if they need to do the CANS certification?
Yes. And so Dr. I'm going to go with Feeks because I've never spoken to him, but I did confirm with him last week that this is the correct person or the current person at the AOC.
I see everybody taking notes. Can we stop? I'm going to stop you right here because that's all. So far, just 10 slides. That's a lot of information. Do we want to take questions if anybody's got questions so far?
Sure.
Sasha, was there any online? Anybody in the room got questions so far? Because I know that's a lot. Okay,
I feel like everyone in the room and online, I feel like they're well versed. They've seen all of this before. This might be a heavy refresher morning for you all. So if that's the case, I hope that leads to an easier Friday morning. And I put the contact in the chat just in case.
When you said that they could not be held, say if they were undocumented,
Yes.
can you repeat that and maybe go into a little bit more information? Because if they're undocumented and they come in, say on misdemeanor charges,
Mhm.
but they can't be held in detention, then can you give a suggestion?
Yeah, so let me go ahead and just address specifically if a youth is not an offender. So if they are brought into the detention center, they have not committed any offense, they are a non-offender, or they're a DNN kid, they haven't committed a crime. There's not a crime for which they can be charged under. So if this individual is merely undocumented, for example, if they had an ICE hold or an ICE retainer, because they haven't committed a crime, they're considered a non-offender and they can't be securely detained or confined. However, any youth who is alleged with committing a misdemeanor crime can be held because there's um, the behavior or offense that's tied to it. So you can be an undocumented individual charged with breaking and entering, and you can be securely detained or confined. Or you could be an individual who's undocumented, who's skipping school, and be charged with a status offense of truancy, but they can't be detained or confined merely because they're undocumented, and also for the JJDPA or the reauthorization, they do not recognize immigration holds. So any youth who hasn't committed any offense and is undocumented, even with a detainer, they couldn't be held in a secure detention facility.
Pam said thank you. Any other questions for Teresa Carries on? Thank you, Teresa.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, ICJ. Again, I know this is a very busy slide and this is a lot of information, but it basically just goes through the timeline. So when you're looking at an out-of-state runaway, say they got permission to go on spring break and they decided that they're just gonna live in Gatlinburg now and they love Pigeon Forge. If they're detained less than 24 hours, I'm not even going to look for ICJ paperwork because um, a facility has 24 hours to identify, process. If they let a youth go within 23 hours and 30 minutes, it doesn't qualify for an ICJ hold. So at 24 hours, at 24 hours and 1 minute, what we start looking for is ICJ paperwork. So that could be an ICJ search hit, petitions, requisition packets. If this individual is in Tennessee and they're not charged with a delinquent charge, if they consent to being returned to their home state, a parent or a guardian can actually pick them up. ICJ rules say basically that juvenile courts and facilities have to return a youth within 5 business days if they consent to being returned. Sometimes youth do not consent to being returned, and then that leads to additional paperwork, petitions. Sometimes the home state has to petition for them to be returned. A judge here makes a decision on that. That requisition is either approved or denied. But all of our ICJ kiddos wrap up in about 90 days. And Corey Copeland in the Office of Juvenile Justice does a great job coordinating these things and making sure facilities have what they need to be able to work through ICJ. It's different than ICPC, the Interstate Compact, that basically covers kiddos. It's usually when they're in DCS custody and they're getting treatment in an out-of-state facility. Sometimes ICJ and ICPC overlap, but it's rare. All right, so guys, as we continue to go through these core requirements, right, separation, sight sound separation is an important one. Studies show that exposure to adult inmates, like you would have even as the result of a scared straight or shock program, increases youth risk of reoffending and worsens youth outcomes. That's just the prevailing message, is that the less that youth are exposed to or detained in carceral settings, the better their trajectory. So what we look for here is sight and sound separation. So sight could be clarified by, I'm so close to you, I can tell what color your eyes are, right? I can reach out and touch you. Sound could be having a conversation. It could be overhearing someone. It could be even just a wall between two cells, but the youth and the adult would be able to have a conversation back and forth. So any sight sound contact, unless it's just brief or inadvertent, would be a compliance monitoring violation. I always like to note here specifically, it only applies to facilities. Youth and adults typically aren't transported together. In the event they were, that would not be a violation because, again, a vehicle isn't a facility and these only apply to facilities. All right, so for jail removal, it's very straightforward. It just says that youth shouldn't be detained or confined in any jail or lockup for adults. There are very few exceptions to that. If you're familiar with social learning theory, you know that the company you keep informs the person that you are. And that's another reason why it's just important to make sure that youth aren't housed or detained with adults. So this work can be very nuanced. There are definitely places where the core requirements don't apply at all, or where they do apply conditionally. You'll see those listed here. If the youth is in an area that's non-secure, which means they don't have any physical or construction features that would detain them, or make them feel as though they weren't free to leave, you can have a youth in a non-secure area of a secure facility. So example would be just a lobby. If they're in a non-secure facility, for example, they're in a police department that has no cells, no cuffing benches, no rails, they can be in that police department and they're still not considered to be detained or confined. You can be in a facility that has a delayed egress door, right? So there's pause on the door before it's going to open. But as long as that pause is less than 30 seconds, it's still not considered a secure facility. And if you have a kiddo who's in a secure facility, but they're waiting for DCS transport, they're waiting for mom or dad to get there. In some of those cases, they're not securely detained or confined because they're just waiting for parent or guardian pickup. So we talk about being detained or confined, and that specific definition from the Act. So when we talk about being held, you can be held in a facility for 23 hours. If you're in a facility 24 hours or longer, then you're placed. And so the time and keeping an eye on the time when you have youth in secure facilities is something that we pay close attention to. Again, just where it applies conditionally, I think about non-secure settings like a courtroom jury box, a break room, a reception area. The elevators, I got this question last week. Are the elevators between the Sally Port courtroom secure? No, they are not. That is a non-secure area. If you've got a holding area that's adjacent to a courtroom, but it's not locked, that's non-secure. Again, lobby of a police department's not secure. So really just for individuals in those facilities, looking for places where a youth could be there, could be safe, but also not detained or confined. This is the last core requirement. we do not report specific data from facilities on reducing racial or ethnic disparities. The focus of this section is really macro, really intentionally broad spectrum. So here, what we look at is implementing policies or practices for systems improvement, looking for changes that ensure more equitable services, including diverse stakeholders, and really just identifying and analyzing data that helps develop work plans that ensure diversity and equity. So all of these things sort of come together and work together to identify and address systemic imbalances that perpetuate oppression and injustice. All right, I'm going to take a deep breath, let all of that settle and simmer. If there are any questions from that section, pop them in the chat if you're online, in the room.
Anybody in the room got questions? Hang on, Teresa.
So on the interstate compact side,
Yes.
does that court have to accept the youth as well? If they're gonna be if they're gonna be, if they're absconding from that court, doesn't that court have to accept it as well?
So
Interstate
Yeah.
the youth.
So on that process, what happens is we identify a youth who is, like you said, an absconder, like if they are away from their home state without permission, especially if their parents reported them as a runaway. If they consent to be returned to their home state, then that transfer is worked out between the holding facility or the holding state and the receiving state. And OJJ's office coordinates with that. If that youth says, no, dad's in Tennessee, I want to live with dad, I'm not going home, then juvenile court does get involved and courts start filing petitions. So at that point, because all states work through ICJ and because ICJ holds the weight of federal law and it's binding on states and agencies, ICJ procedures have to be followed.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Teresa.
Yes, ma'am.
Anybody else? Good, Teresa.
We're going to talk about interest of justice 223 A11B. It gets its own nickname, it's IOJ, but we're just going to call it 11B for this morning. So here, when you have a youth who is bound over to adult court, one of the primary documents we look at for compliance with 223 A11B, which is just a subsection of the Juvenile Justice Reform Act. And again, that was passed in 2018 and Tennessee adopted it in 2019. So when we look at the transfer order, where a youth comes into custody, they're in juvenile court, the judge makes the decision that they need to be transferred to adult court. What I look at in a transfer order are these 7 factors listed here on the slide. And that's because federal statute states that if a youth is going to be held in an adult facility as the result of a transfer to adult court, all of these factors have to be considered, and it has to be determined that it's in the interest of justice for a youth to be held in an adult facility. Otherwise, right, because this is an exception, otherwise youth can't be held in an adult facility for more than 6 hours. So we have age, physical and mental maturity, present mental state, whether there's an imminent risk of harm to themselves. The facts are, I guess, the alleged facts of the offense, priors. Also, number 6, I'm going to draw our attention to the ability of the available adult and juvenile detention facilities to meet the specific needs of the juvenile, but also to protect the safety of the public as well as other detained youth. especially if a youth is going to be held in an adult facility. Number 6 is important to address, just because it clarifies that there's also a consideration for the young person, for the other young people in the youth facility, and also for the public. And then any other factors a court can add or a consideration or help clarify why a decision was made to transfer to an adult facility. Transfer orders that don't have all 7 of these factors, that incurs 1 compliance monitoring violation. And then if they're in an adult facility without this and without their 30-day hearings, then they start having violations every 30 days. So again, this is just going to be in your transfer orders or in your orders where it's decided that a youth is going to be held in an adult facility while they're awaiting trial. Which court would the violations be against? Dawn, I see your question right there. I'm gonna stick a pin in that. I've got a few more slides on this. That information will be revealed. Give me just a moment. All right. So again, what compliance monitors are looking for are those transfer orders or paperwork that's just clarifying that it's either in the interest of justice for youth to be held in an adult facility while they await trial or while they're working through plea deals, what have you. And that it's also required by the act that every 30 days, whether the judge or magistrate has changed their mind or not, there's still supposed to be a hearing and an order generated from that hearing every 30 days. So we know that when our youth are transferred over to adult court, that they are no longer under the jurisdiction of our juvenile court at that time, right? So that's going to be a criminal court, circuit court decision. And it can be written in the order referencing interest of justice 223A11B that the youth should have a hearing, an interest of justice hearing every 30 days. We understand that that's out of juvenile court's hands, and that information can be included in the order. So the other complicating factor is that if a youth has been in an adult facility for 180 days, there should also be a good cause extension hearing held to determine whether it continues to be in the interest of justice even after 180 days. So the youth can waive that good cause extension hearing, and under 11B, in no case can a youth be held more than 360 days in an adult facility. So if that youth is awaiting trial and they're held in a juvenile facility, or if they're transferred to the adult facility, their sight sound separated and they bond out within a 6-hour exception window, there's not a DSO, sight sound, or jail removal violation, and interest of justice doesn't apply. So if youth remain in the juvenile facility, there's no violation. If they're only in the adult facility for 6 hours and then they bond out, or there's a plea agreement that's struck, sometimes I see a youth who is in the juvenile facility and they've already got court orders, they're booked into the adult facility, and then they bond right out. So neither of those would be violations. And so Dawn, to your question, which court would the violations be against? So the state would take the violation. Because we report statewide data to the federal government under this grant, we track it by county, because that could potentially impact whether counties are able to participate in our federal formula grant program as subgrantees. But the state accrues violations. If we get too many violations, we are found out of compliance for one of those 4 requirements. This one is 223A11. So A11 is your deinstitutionalization of status offenders. So If we got too many of them, we would be out of compliance for the DSO requirement. I'm glad that you found that helpful, Dawn. So there's a bench card, which is what you're going to see over here to your left with those 4 quadrants. That goes over everything that we've talked about. A bench card is just like a good sort of Cliff's Notes for judges. There's a sample language or sample order or a checklist that I use to see if there's IOJ violations. That's going to be on our website. That link is here.
Teresa, I'm gonna stop you for a
Mhm.
second. Sorry to interrupt. The bench card is also in your packet for those of you in the room. For everybody online, remember, follow-up email. I'll make sure those links are in that follow-up email list too. Like Teresa said, those are also available on our website. Sorry for interrupting.
No, you're fine. You're fine. All right. In the room, I hope y'all are hanging on in there. I hope you're still with me. All right, we've gone over OJJDP, we've gone over the Juvenile Justice Reform Act, we've gone over the 4 core requirements. Y'all, this is my favorite part of the presentation, okay? How state compliance equals federal dollars for Tennessee. This is really important. We talk about these core requirements and why it's so vital that we adhere to them. So state compliance equals federal formula grant dollars for Tennessee. So the Office of Juvenile Justice awards TCCY as the designated state agency as the recipient of Title II federal formula grant dollars when we're in compliance as a state. So TCCY is the pass-through agency. So we take those funds and then we pass them through to programs who are working in the community with youth. So these grants can provide up to $75,000 per new recipient, and they can fund through continuation grants for up to 3 years. So delinquency prevention, substance abuse prevention and treatment, and reduction of racial and ethnic disparities are our program areas currently. So after school programs, truancy reduction, diversion programs, those would fall under delinquency prevention because that category is really broad. Substance abuse prevention and treatment could be assessment, therapy, case management, and then reduction of disparities between racial and ethnic groups in the youth justice system. Again, when we talked about that core requirement, it's very broad. And we have great programs out in the community who are looking at how they can do that in their areas. So Tennessee's received and passed through more than $5 million in support of local, rural, and urban programs and communities, like I said, directly serving children and their families. So these can be juvenile courts, after-school programs, substance abuse, treatment and prevention, law enforcement agencies. Now, these are the agencies that I could fit on a slide. But all of this goes towards helping these agencies and these programs do the hands-on work that really helps kids build better futures so they can lead better lives. And so when we're thinking, sorry, I'm just going to go back. So when we're thinking about compliance, right, making sure status offenders are out of facilities in under 24 hours, making sure that ICJ kiddos, if they're there more than 24 hours, that there's an ICJ hit, there's a requisition packet that ICJ has followed. PREA compliance even impacts the amount of funding that we're able to receive, but the ultimate goal of statewide compliance is to ensure youth justice and also prevent justice involvement for kids. All right, so typically I would cover state of the child, juvenile justice data, but y'all are in for a treat today because Kylie's shown here and she's going to present next on the state of the child and the juvenile justice data specific to Tennessee. Here, I'll just note that overall youth crime is down. It remains below pre-pandemic levels, even though it has risen between 2020 and 2025. That data reflects sort of the dip that came from the pandemic. And you'll see here, and I know Kylie will talk about this, You see the dip, you see that it was higher before, and that it's still lower even 5 years later. One of the ways we engage youth voice is through the Youth in Detention Survey. And this survey goes out at different points within the year and asks youth in secure facilities things like, what's happened in your life? How's education for you? What sort of problems have you encountered? What is your family situation? What is your home life like? Do you feel safe in your home? Are you safe in your community? Do you have an adult that you can ask for help? So the strongest correlation from this data emerged from youth reports of getting into trouble at school, then failing a class or a grade, and missing 10 or more days of school. All of those things came together, and we have the highest reports of those things from youth in secure facilities. We also asked them what they want to be when they grow up, and none of them say that they want to be criminals or juvenile delinquents. The majority of them report that they want to go into service roles. They want to be nurses. They want to be firefighters. They want to be soldiers. This last year, there was an increase in skilled labor responses. So they want to do construction, or they want to do concrete or HVAC. Every single youth had a dream and has a dream for who they want to be. And I think part of improving the youth justice system is helping them get there. So this slide references Northeast Tennessee because this is not the slide deck that I had for today. My tech did not quite tech the way that I wanted it to, but we can roll with the changes. Because the overall message is, how can we use what we know to spark change where we are? How does statewide data trickle down to helping me in my backyard, in my community? So when I look at truancy and I look at what kids say about truancy statewide, there are things that sort of will ring true regardless of where we are. So looking at programs that keep youth in school for less serious infractions. We have a grant fundee in Anderson County, and they worked with 3 school districts to make first offense vaping a class that they go to during the day, and an additional requirement for a class on Saturday. But they don't get referred to juvenile court, and they don't miss 5 or 10 days of school. They stay in school. So resources for transportation, so youth can get to school when they miss the bus, when a parent or a guardian isn't there, can't help. So bus passes, right? Looking at district policies on that first time vaping infraction, this program in Anderson County, they removed status offenses from the records of 25 children, right? So those are 25 kids who had a youth record and a youth offense, and now they don't. Built-in block scheduling that gives midday tiered support in reading and math. We know that holding those supports first thing in the morning may not be beneficial for our kiddos who maybe need the most help and also struggle getting to school on time. There was a program in Pennsylvania that found that adding washers and dryers to their high schools and allowing youth to use that midday block to do laundry reduced truancy, I think, by 90%. Being the smelly kid will keep a kid home 100 out of 100% of the time, right? Youth in that age group are so sensitive to their peers. And thinking about what else can we do if truancy is a big factor where you are in West Tennessee? What can we do that we haven't tried yet? And that's because systems transformation requires partnership. So I know that you all hear this all day, every day, because we're all doing the same work, but systems transformation requires partnership. It requires collaboration, and it's going to require solutions-focused, open-minded approaches. How do we use what we have, the tools, the services, the businesses, the agencies, those places that are already up and running, especially in our rural communities? How can we work with them to leverage what they're doing well into initiatives that serve kids and families with systems involvement. I always say I love Dr. Monty Burks in the governor's office of faith-based initiatives because he's working with religious communities and those leaders to repurpose spaces for kids in DCS custody that need a temporary place to stay. There's that truancy reduction program in Pennsylvania with the washers and dryers. That showed up in our Tennessee data. So ride shares, just things that we can do, maybe that we have tried, haven't tried. But Liz Ryan, the former OJJVP administrator, she said that partnerships with and between individuals, child serving agencies, nonprofits, and community-based organizations are absolutely critical. And especially in this time where funding and surety of funding is changing, working closely together is more important than ever. Friends, it's been so much information. I appreciate you all sticking here with me through the end. What questions do you have?
Any questions for Teresa? Dana's wrote some down for you, Teresa.
That's okay. I know Dana keeps me on my toes and I appreciate it. I could talk about this all day. So y'all, if you
I've been
think of
around a
anything,
long time.
yes, ma'am. If
Well,
y'all think of anything later, just send me an email. You've got my contact information there.
So, Teresa, I think that there's just a lot of information that maybe some of the courts and others probably don't know enough to ask a question about. So I'm going to ask some questions and kind of break it down a little bit. So has all of the juvenile court general session judges received the updated language and information to put in their court orders regarding interest of justice language?
So we've worked with, right, Judge Philyaw is the chair of our commission, but also of the TJCSA or the juvenile courts groups. He's worked with Quest at the administrative office of the courts to get that standard language in there. However, it's gotten out to juvenile courts. It's not gotten out to circuit courts. And even if they have the language in Quest, not every county uses Quest. It's certainly an uphill march, but I think it's possible.
So, okay, just to clarify that, so the courts that are not present here today, it would be prudent if we shared that. I mean, should every regional coordinator be sharing that with a judge, is what you're saying? That it's not come from the top, we need to do it from the bottom up, if in case they're not in Quest?
Yes. The 30-day requirement for the hearings is less pressing because there just aren't as many youth and adult facilities as there are youth being transferred to adult court. So by focusing on juvenile courts first, right, that one violation that we get for not having all 7 factors in the transfer order, if that transfer order is coming from juvenile court, and that's sort of where I've started. Because those are the courts that we have the most contact and the best relationships with, but making sure circuit courts are aware of these 30-day hearing requirements is definitely something I can use help with.
Right. How many in the room have the YSOs have ongoing contact with a circuit court once a juvenile has been transferred? So everybody's shaking heads that they don't even have any contact with the circuit courts. So yeah, that's I mean, I know it's a huge part of, the new requirements, but our involvement, and I didn't know from the court side if they had ongoing contact about those youth, or once they're transferred one and done, and then it becomes their issues. Okay.
And
All right.
that's an important thing to point out, Data, because those of us like who don't work in juvenile courts or who haven't been in court settings even, you might, right, like the average person might think, oh, of course all the court staff talk, but that's not always true.
Hey Teresa, this
Yes.
is Sasha. Have you talked with other states in regards to this? Who would possibly be the best person to contact in circuit court in regards to that? And have they had, what were their findings or how did they navigate that process?
Yeah, so the Coalition on Juvenile Justice, or CJJ, is one of our primary training and technical assistance providers, and they provide like a nationwide forum. They do compliance monitoring calls and juvenile justice specialist calls. Just this past week, we did a Southern regional call. So other states have things set up different ways. So with Tennessee being the designated state agency, TCCY is its own agency. Other states, their designated state agency is a court agency, or it's more like our administrative office of the courts. So in other states, the way information is dispersed is different. And we talk about how data and systems are de-siloed here. New Mexico, smaller state, but basically their designated state agency puts in the order for 11B with the transfer information already in there and it's fillable. And then they can't submit the order until all of the fields are filled. So nationwide, Sasha, to your point, things are different in every state.
So, Teresa, I'm not putting you on the spot, but one of the things that we prided ourselves on after we came out of compliance, and we did come out of compliance about 20 years ago. And when Tennessee came back in compliance, we have worked very hard to make sure that, we have minimal violations and that, we feel like our court staff, we have those kind of relationships that we can give them the information and stuff. Now, the circuit courts, that's a whole new game to us. And I know that, early on when this came out, that our letter to all of the circuit court clerks, but sometimes that's a letter and they probably didn't understand it. Now that we have the bench cards that explain all of that, do you know if that has been given to the circuit courts as well? The judges, the clerks, the staff? I mean, I don't have a role in that, but I think the counties would be very upset. I'm just going to say that everybody's going to be upset if there's violations, that goes back to their county. Everybody's shaking their head that they're going to be upset when they had no control over it, or the people didn't have the information to begin with. They don't want to be reactive. They want to be proactive.
Yeah. No, I mean, I definitely understand that. There's UT maintains a website that gives the contact information for juvenile court directors, circuit court, criminal court directors. Unfortunately, the emails aren't always updated. I agree that they should definitely be aware of it, whether or not circuit courts are as familiar with the JJDPA or the JJRA. I can't speak to that. 11B, interest of justice requirements went into effect in 2021, and OJJDP has been tracking that data starting in 2023. It's in my 1-year business plan to make sure we've made contact with every circuit court in the state. And And I'm happy to do that. And if anybody has contacts in their own spaces or in their counties or in their areas, if you know the person to talk to, please let me know. I'm happy to share, Richard's letter is on the website, on the Juvenile Justice Reform website, where the bench card, the sample order, and the checklist are all uploaded there. They can be kind of bulky files, and so they don't always email well. But all of that information is there, and I am happy to get the message out to anyone who will listen.
So I think that creates an opportunity for us to work with our courts to get the most up-to-date information, because they will have that. I mean, they will know who the circuit court judge is, who the circuit court clerk is, who some of the staff are. And that, I think we can work with our courts to compile that. We just hadn't been asked. And I mean, it will be a little work for them, but I knowing the people that we do, I mean, they'll be glad to do that. I mean, nobody wants violations. I mean, especially if it's going to go back to their county of origin. So we have another question
Well,
from the audience.
Things on, but I was just going to comment that I don't know if maybe our district attorneys too could assist with this, because they will be involved in those cases also. And one of our ADAs did provide me with like the check off list of those things. So too, that's another source I think we can look to make sure that things go smoothly, hopefully.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Great suggestion.
And I love that
So-
your ADA had that.
And it's not, I'm sure that they haven't received training on it, but sometimes, this has been confusing to even the staff. So I can't imagine getting some information in the mail and then not, you don't understand it. So you just put it aside or whatever. And sometimes, unless it pops up and there's a problem, you don't deal with it until it's a problem. But I just think everybody in the room today that works anyway with a court or their community, they want to make sure that they are being as proactive as possible and as helpful as possible. And so, we could compile not only the circuit court contacts, but also the DAs and assistant DAs, the one who actually comes to court as well. And then that will give you something to reach out to them and talk to them and send them. We'll get some emails as well.
That sounds
So
amazing.
I want to clarify one thing. What did you say the maximum number of days that a kid who's been transferred can be held in an adult jail?
360.
Okay. So, yeah. So what are they supposed to do with the, because this has happened in in some of my counties where, a young person unfortunately committed not one or maybe two or three murders. And, juveniles have to have those evaluations even afterwards. Sometimes young people have a hard time adjusting to the jail life, especially the solitary confinement. And oftentimes that's what that is, because, they have to be kept sight and sound separate. So my
Also, if they're very young.
yeah. And so my question is, if they have not gone through the entire court process and this person has been found guilty and sentenced, and it's past the 360 days, is that automatically a violation?
Okay, so let me speak to what you said. Because of the mental health impact on that youth, because of the long-term impact on that youth, that's part of the impetus behind the DOJ asking and requiring through the JJRA that they have these interest of justice hearings every 30 days, because they want it front of mind in courts that youth are sitting in facilities primarily alone, and that the interest of justice doesn't just include justice for the community or for the people who have been harmed, that there's also an aspect of justice for the accused who's innocent until they're found guilty. So if a youth is in an adult facility awaiting trial, then these requirements apply. But so Dana, in that specific situation, if the young person has been sentenced, then interest of justice no longer applies. It only applies to youth awaiting trial in an adult facility.
Well, I've had some that took longer than a year. I'm not saying it should have, but it did. But it did. I mean, there's just sometimes a lot going on, but because we're very fortunate that, you know, that the facility, once they're sentenced, they go to Northwest Correctional up in Tiptonville, Lake County Prison.
But
You
they
know,
won't
there's a
take them
whole
till they're
separate unit
16.
for that.
But they won't take them
But
till
they
they're
can
16.
take them until they are 16. So if you've got a youth that's 15 and they're been tried and sentenced, then there is nowhere for that youth to go because our regional detention centers will not keep them. So has there been any conversation when you talk to other states? Do they? I mean, it seems like we're penalizing people because there's no options. And I'm not picking on you. I'm just saying we're just trying to figure this out.
Yeah, and other states have different approaches to where they might hold youth who have already been sentenced. They might have youth specific secure correctional facilities that are specifically for youth post sentencing. It's Tennessee
let
is
me-
unique in a lot of
So
ways,
if
and
they've
it's
been
unique in that way.
sentenced, they can
Yes.
stay in the adult jail.
Technically, if they've been found guilty, if they've been tried as an adult and found guilty, then they can be held as an adult.
Okay.
There's a
So the
swing population.
360 only applies pre-sentencing.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. We're just trying to get it all. I'm doing the talking, but they're talking too. So
The room is nodding.
Dana always has good questions, y'all, so that's good.
well, you know, sometimes OJJDP language is very confusing. And I'm
Yes.
just trying to break it down where if courts can go back and have conversations with their judges, if they know their circuit court judge, you know, whatever, that they can have a conversation. If it needs to go into a lot more detail, of course, they can contact you. But you know,
Absolutely.
just those one-off conversations, I just wanted to make sure that they had some basics that maybe they could have conversations about, because, you know, one of the things we always want to do, we want to do the right thing. And, but, you know, trying to do the right thing without the resources to do the right thing sometimes is really difficult. And,
Yeah, well, and to your point about resources, even just the information, right, having it sort of simplified in a way that's easy to talk about, the bench card does a great job with that. And again, the other information online that's the documents that are there, the checklist is maybe a little onerous. It's a lot of information, but the sample order makes it really easy to understand, right? Like all 7 factors have to be considered. So there are different pieces of resources, and I have tons. So if there's something somebody has an idea for, let me know. I'm happy to work with our partners at CJJ or even just within our office to get things that are easy for people to understand. But I love the bench card. I think the bench card does a great job. But yeah.
are there any more questions or comments or clarifications?
For everybody in the room, like I said, that bench card is in your packet. Also, there is a sample of an adult transfer order in your packet also that Teresa made available. So you can share that with your judges.
And this will all be sent, you know, you'll get this through an email as well, so that you can then email it to your judges and to the other court staff or people, your assistant DA, and just so that everybody has it. And, the orders are already complete. So, I mean, maybe we can transition to that, and that could be an easier fix. 11B, we got to work on, but so. So Teresa, does anybody have any?
Any other questions in the room or online?
Teresa, we really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And now go enjoy your time off at
Yes,
Fall
ma'am.
Creek Falls. And we hope you have a great weekend.
Yeah, Teresa didn't mention that she's joining us from Fall Creek Falls today. So
Nice to
we're
know.
not sure our sanity because Teresa actually managed to join us from a park.
And I'd have been there in the room with y'all. Y'all know Jackson has a special place in my heart. Hopefully next time I'll get to be in this space there with you all, but otherwise reach out with any questions. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Teresa.
So we're going to take
a break.
about a 10-15-minute break.
Let's go till 10:30 because that's when Kylie's supposed to
10:30.
join. us.
Kylie will be on at 10.
Kylie's on. Okay.
Kylie's on.
We're going
I'm
till
on.
10.
Yep, I'm
Let's-
here.
All right,
Okay,
what about-
Kylie, we're going to start back at 10:30.
Well,
Sounds great.
Well, it's 20 minutes. Everybody a bathroom break.
Oh, okay.
Remember, bathrooms are over here, coffee and breakfast still at the back of the room. Network for a few minutes and make sure you come back at 10:30 so we can restart with Kylie and the county profiles. Everybody online, please go to your bathrooms if you need to. Everybody in the room and online, you have a 3-minute warning. This is your 3-minute warning. Check your slides and see if they pop up.
I was just about to do that. Let me,
And go ahead.
perfect. For the most part, I'll actually be sharing browser. So, there you go. All right, cool. Seems to be working.
Ma'am. Will you make sure you show the link on our website and the data dashboard both, please?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. In the room, you have 1 minute to find your seats. 1 minute. Her camera. Tasha's waving at you, Callie. It's adjusted. Highlight it. Hey, everybody online and in the room, it's 10:30, so I'm gonna go ahead and get us rolling back to start. Hey, everybody, we ready? Next on our agenda, we have our Kylie Graves, our TCCY Director of Data Policy and Communications. Every year she has the task of doing all sorts of things. I was told last week by our director that she's the smart one, and I agreed, and he shot me a side eye. But Kylie's here today to talk more about our county profiles, but she also has the opportunity to do our state of the child. She does our budget recommendations and helps with our resource mapping every year. Actually does our resource mapping up until now. Hopefully she's going to get a little bit more assistance with some of that, but she does it all in our office. But today she's joined us because she's going to specifically talk more on our county profile data that just came out and anything else you have questions on. So take it away, Kylie. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Glad to be with y'all virtually. I wish I could be there in person, but we'll take virtual this time. So like Jerry said, every year we do county profiles, and these have been going on for maybe the last 8 or so years. That really came from, we do a lot of statewide reporting, like she mentioned, the state of the child and some other kind of more global looks at how children are doing across the state. However, we had more and more people requesting specific information on how their communities are doing. We know that Tennessee is really diverse, and the needs in the rural communities can look different than the needs in the suburban and urban communities. And so we created the county profiles to provide that kind of hyper-local focus on how kids are doing. We really enjoy doing these. It's really interesting. It's also one of the things that we see the most people use for grants in their community and to bring funds directly into their community to help children. And so that's a really encouraging part of the county profiles, is seeing that direct benefit to the communities. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I will show you the county profiles. So these are our county profiles that we released. I'm going to zoom in just slightly. We released these back in July. And so with the county profiles, there's 2 spots you can get them. You can get them from our future data dashboard, which is here, and I can provide the links. Or additionally, if you go to our website, we can take you back. If you go to our homepage, it's tn.gov/TCCY, and just select county profiles there, and it will take you to that same information. So we're going to work off the dashboard just because it's a little bit larger for y'all to see. So with the county profiles, each county will receive an overall ranking. There are 95 counties in the state, so counties are ranked 1 to 95. In both the overall ranking and ranking specific to indicators, number 1 is always going to be the best performing, or the outcome that we're looking for. And then 95th is going to be the area with most opportunity or greatest challenge. So counties will receive an overall ranking. And then we also divide the profiles into 4 domains. So we look at economic well-being, education, health, and family and community. And we'll go into what each of those entail. But so the county will also receive a ranking for that domain. Under each domain are 3 different things that we're looking at, and so they'll receive a ranking for those 3 as well. But just looking overall, this is kind of a map where you can look and see how it breaks out across the state. The lighter colors are going to be closer to 1 to 10, and then the darker shades are going to be those higher up numbers. And then also this chart has the overall ranking for the counties. This year, the top performing counties were Williamson, Wilson, Weakley, Sumner, Rutherford, Loudoun, Trousdale, Carroll, Gibson, and Blunt. And then the counties with the area for most opportunity for improvement are Lake, Shelby, Madison, Hardeman, Davidson, Haywood, Johnson, Grundy, Lauderdale, Sequatchie, and Pickett. And so when we look at the county profiles, the information that we're looking at, first, when we talk about economic well-being, we are looking at the percent of children who are living in poverty in that community. And so that is below the federal poverty level. For context, in 2023, which is the numbers that we are looking at, the federal poverty level for a family of 3 was just over $23,000. So that's what we're looking at. Statewide, 18.9% of our children lived in poverty. That's a slight increase from the previous year where we were at 17.8%. We do have new other statewide data from a different source that indicates in 2024 child poverty has gone up again, but we'll wait for this as well. Child poverty does range pretty drastically depending on county. So the county that's strongest in this indicator is Williamson, with 4.7% of their children living in poverty. And then the county with the greatest area for opportunity for improvement is Lake County at 45.2% of their children living in poverty. With childcare cost burden, statewide, when we talk about childcare cost burden, essentially what that is looking at the market rate average cost for childcare in that community for an infant and a 2-year-old in full-time care, and comparing the total of those 2 to what that county's median household income is. And so what percentage of childcare for an infant and a 2-year-old would that take up of median household income? Statewide, that would be 29.7%. That is a slight improvement from the previous year where we were at 40.9%. So childcare costs relative to median household income have decreased. However, childcare is still very expensive for a lot of families. The lowest childcare cost burden is in Campbell County at 16.5%. And then the highest is in Scott at 55.4%. For severe housing cost burden, that's a 5-year average of the percent of households in that community who are spending 50% or more of their income on housing costs, whether that be mortgaged or rented homes. Also includes owned homes as well. And so in Tennessee, that was 11.5. That's an increase from the previous 5 years, which was 2018 to 2022, where it was at 7.8%. We do see some shifts around counties here. So Van Buren has the lowest housing cost burden with 4.1% of their households spending more than half of their income on rent or mortgage. And then in Shelby, they have 16.8% of their households spending that much. For education, we look at TCAP reading and math. That's 3rd through 8th grade, so all of those scores, and looking at the students who meet or exceed expectations. In education across the board, we saw improvement in almost every county in all 3 indicators, which is extremely encouraging. And then we also look at high school graduation, so the percent of high school students who are graduating within 4 years. For TCAP reading and math, we were at 38.9% and 42.2%. And so that is an improvement from the previous year. Again, with this one, we see some large shifts county to county. Williamson and Lake have the highest and lowest for both indicators. So Williamson is at 66.9 in reading and 73.2 in math. And then Lake is going to be at 18.3 in reading and 9.8% of students meet or exceed expectations in math. For high school graduation, we're at 92.1%, which is an improvement over the previous year. And we aren't comparing nationally with this, but typically when we look at Tennessee's rate nationally, we do outperform quite a bit of the country in terms of high school graduation. The strongest performing was Macon County at 98.8, and then the county with the most area for opportunity for improvement is Robertson County at 79.7. For health, we're looking at kindergarten immunizations. So this was the school year 23-24, and that is the percent of students, public school kindergarten students who have the full recommended vaccinations. And so we're at 93%, and that is a slight decrease from the previous year. We're at 93.5. Pickett County had 100% of their public school kindergartners with all recommended vaccinations. Van Buren had the greatest area for improvement in this, which is 64.3. So we get this from the health department, and there's 2 metrics they're looking at, which is the community falling below 95% of students vaccinated? And then are they falling below 90%? And both of those have some implications for herd immunity. When we're looking at low birth weight, Tennessee has remained pretty consistent with this, with 9.1% of our babies born at a low birth weight. And that has pretty much remained that way for the last 3 or 4 years. The lowest percentage of babies born at a low birth weight is in Perry County at 5.2%. And then the highest is going to be in Lake County at 14.2%. For children uninsured, this is our most lagging indicator. It does take a little bit to get health insurance information by county. Slightly after we released this, just maybe a couple weeks, they did publish 2023 data. So on our dashboard, there is more up-to-date information. But for county profiles, we were looking at 2022. We did have a slight increase. We're now 5.3% of Tennessee children were uninsured. That did range from 3.3% to 8.7%. When we look at the youth crime rate, that is the youth crime rate per 1,000, and that was for 2023. We get that information from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations, Tennessee Incident-Based Reporting System. And so we'll talk a little bit more later about that data, but we did see a slight increase from 43.0 the year prior. Lowest crime rates in the state are going to be in Perry and Pickett County, where they report 0 crimes of those aged 10 to 17. And then Murray County has the highest crime rate in the state at 80.1. For chronic absenteeism, that is going to be the percent of public school students or students who miss 10% or more of days, and that includes both excused and unexcused absences. And so we did see some slight improvement with this. Tennessee is now 18.9% of our students are chronically absent, down from 20.3. Meigs County has the highest or the lowest at 16.4. And then Sequatchie County has the highest at 32.7. And then when we look at victims of abuse or neglect per 1,000, that is going to be the number of substantiated allegations of abuse in severe instances. And then in neglect cases where they're not substantiated, we look at services court ordered or services needed determinations. And so we're at 17.0 per 1,000 across the state. And that does change from 3.5 in Williamson to 70.7 in Bledsoe. So going back through here, when you're on the county profiles page, you can look and pick out your county. And when you go to your county's page, you'll see the overall ranking, economic well-being ranking, education, health, family, and community. And then as you scroll down, you'll see that same kind of chart that we were looking at specific to your county. So this is going to be this year's numbers. Up top here, we have the reference year. So 2023 is the child poverty we're looking at. Fiscal 24 is the child care cost burden on the way down. And so you can see this year's rank, this last year's data, last year's rank, and the statewide percentage. And then for each county, we'll point out some of the strengths and then areas for opportunities for improvement. For those areas of opportunities for improvement, we also provide some recommendations that can be implemented on a county level regarding those areas and ways to kind of improve that. Additionally, if you click here, there will be another set of county level data. Depending on the size of your county, we may or may not be able to have all of this information, but it is here. We don't rank the counties on these ones because we can't get this information for every county, but you will be able to see the number, your rate compared to the Tennessee rate, and then the year that we're referencing there. Additionally, for each domain, we have a page where you can go look and learn more about those domains. So this is a heat map of the economic overall rankings. Here you can see children living in poverty statewide this year compared to previous, this year compared to previous, and this year compared to previous. You can also drop down and look at how things are going county-wise. Below here, we have the definitions for those indicators, and then all of our recommendations related to this domain, and then also the rankings here. Additionally, on the page, you can click here for each county, and it will give you a printable version. This isn't the more traditional, if you're familiar with our county profiles, this is what we've provided in the past. So that is still available. And then additionally, if you go down here, it will take you to our sources and methodology page. And so that will have where all of this information is coming from, any explanations that are needed. All of that is there. And then kind of the methodology behind how these rankings are calculated. So that is the county profiles. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. See, do y'all have any questions specific to the county profiles? And then we can go into some of our budget recommendations and some youth crime data specifically, but wanted to pause and see if there were any questions.
Any questions about the county profile data? Just remember that, like Kylie mentioned, you can get to them from our future data dashboard. Kylie, could you show the data dashboard for just a second? Because I don't know if anybody's actually.
Let me zoom out.
This just came about in January, so our data dashboard's fairly new, but you can click on separate indicators and pull up data from that way too. And I know Kylie, you can explain that a lot better than I can.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll walk through, I'll show some of the youth crime data that we have. But yeah, so this is where you can get the county profiles. You can also get them just from our main website if you're more familiar with that as well. Like I said, that's tn.gov/TCCY. And that would go right there.
Got a question in the room, Kylie.
Oh, great.
Hi, Kylie. So just looking at truancy, and you mentioned Sequatchie County, what about those counties? Is it taken into account, like if they have a, say, a natural disaster, like a tornado, or when the big floods came through East Tennessee? Is that kind of thing taken into account when you're looking at something like truancy? Because that would skew the numbers.
So I'll have to do some digging because I don't know. So this is based off of DOE's reporting on, chronic absenteeism and the number of excused or unexcused absences. And I'm not sure with DOE when, say, the entire school is closed, how they are recording that. If the entire school is closed, are they reporting all kids as absent? Or is that, I'll have to look and see how DOE is figuring that. Similarly, like if they close for a snow day or something like that, I don't.
Natural disasters, usually there's some sort of exemptions for days on natural disasters, just like when we have tornadoes and things here. I'm not sure if it's a total DOE thing or if it's policy county by county, district by district. Because
Yeah, that's, I'll
certain
have to
ones,
look and see.
certain ones get more snow days. Certain school systems ask for more snow days and things.
Absolutely. And I think,
Even if the school's not closed, if it's just something that affects like a lot of kids in the county, if they're
Yeah,
home,
so if-
you see what I'm saying?
yeah, absolutely. So if they were absent those days, they would be factored into the chronically absent. So that is something to take into consideration because it does include both excused and unexcused. So even, students with significant medical challenges or something like that may end up being considered chronically absent. And yeah, I would say if the school wasn't closed, then DOE would likely be counting them as absent in one form or another.
Thank you, Kelly. So, and also as Kylie mentioned, on this page for our county profiles, you can pull up county by county, like she showed that big screenshot. But if you click on the little printer off in this, off the side of each one of those counties, you'll see that regular 4-page report that you're used to. And that's the one that you'll want to print out. The other one prints out, it will print, but it doesn't print out quite as, yeah. Sabrina just said quite as neat. Yeah. Thank you, Kylie. Any other
Okay,
questions in the room? Any online, Sasha? Go ahead, Kylie.
Okay, and then I was just going to show y'all with our data dashboard, we do have a section on youth crime. And so going through here, this information does come from, similarly, the Tennessee Incident-Based Reporting System. And so with that, we use the measure across pretty much all of our reporting. We use we use the measure of crimes. So with that and how it's reported into TIBERS, they do not have to have made an arrest. There does not have to be a specific perpetrator. These are based off of police reporting. And so sometimes we look at age 10 to 17. Sometimes there is the chance that there may have been someone incorrectly identified as 10 to 17. They may in actuality be 20 or something of that nature. And also with the measure of crimes, it does count each individual victim in crime separately. So if you have one youth who assaulted multiple people, those assaults would all count individually. Tibers is a public portal, I mean, not a public portal, a live portal, meaning it can be updated and changed in real time as we go. So we always try and pull data around the same time of year just to try and keep it as consistent as possible. But things do change as reports get updated, new information gets added, things like that. We might see some slight shifts. So the most recent data we have on our data dashboard is going to be from 2023. There is now 2024 numbers on the TBI portal. We are just waiting, like I mentioned, we try to replicate the data each year around the same time. And so we're waiting until November to update all of this just to try and stay as consistent as possible. But I will provide y'all with some of the 2024 numbers as well. So this is looking at the crime rate for all types of crime across the state. Here, this darker or this green is going to be the all ages crime rate. And here, the bluish color is going to be the age 10 to 17 crime rate. Every time when we look at crime, we do see this pattern specific to teens and kids. We didn't see it among adults of a dip in the crime rate during the pandemic. This was likely due to kids being at home and just not getting into as much trouble or in places where they got themselves into trouble. And so then we kind of see it starting to rebound. We did see in the 2024 numbers, I'll switch over back and forth, the overall crime rate is 41.6 per 1,000. So it does appear to have gone down just slightly. Like I mentioned, we are still just waiting until we can kind of get the same time frame. And then over here, this is the number of crimes, all ages. And then we can see the number of crimes by those age 10 to 17. And then additionally here, we've got a heat map of the crime rate by county. And so you can go county to county and see what the crime rate was. And then here we have the crime rate change over the decade. So between 2023 or 2013 and 2023, did the crime rate for age 10 to 17 in that county increase or decrease? The yellow shaded ones saw an increase. The dark green shaded saw a decrease. And then in there, you'll see the number decrease. And so that was the decrease in the rate. So it went down in, we'll say Shelby County by 24.7 per 1,000 over the decade. Moving through here, we have crimes against persons. We also have for each of these kind of the definition of what falls under these crimes. Here you'll see the similar thing, the crime rate over the decade. Again, with the youth, we saw that dip in the pandemic. And you can see the numbers of crime rates. The crime rate per person in 2023, or crimes against persons in 2023 was 23.9. Our kind of preliminary numbers are 24.8 for 2024. So we did see an increase there. Again, we've got kind of that heat map of crimes against persons and then the change over the decade. Here you can see crimes against property. And so we have that similar shift. And then age 10 to 17, the numbers that we're seeing, these are all the crimes that would fall under crimes against property. Heat map here of where these are most prevalent. And then the change over the decade, most counties saw a decrease in crimes against property. And then crimes against society. This one's a little bit less clear sometimes for people, but that includes animal cruelty, drug and narcotics violations, gambling, pornography, prostitution, promoting and assisting or purchasing prostitutions, and weapons law violations. For 10 to 17, the majority of crimes against society that we're going to see are drug and narcotic violations and weapons law violations. That's typically what the majority of them are. And so we did see a slight increase over the last little bit. And we see the numbers for age 10 to 17. I believe crimes against society went down in 2024, 6.9 per 1,000. So we did see kind of a drop back down in 2024 potentially. And then here's that heat map again. And then the change over the decade. We did see more counties with increases in these crimes against society. A lot of that is weapons law violations driven. We've seen quite a bit of an increase there. So then switching over just to give a little bit of an update on some 2024 numbers. Like I referenced as we were going through, these are kind of the crime rates we're seeing in 2024 potentially for age 10 to 17. And then one of the things we're looking at is specifically when it comes to murders by 10 to 17, we have seen in 2024 a pretty significant increase. There is always the chance that that number may change up or down as new information about the perpetrators might come available. But we did see a pretty significant jump to 56. And then down below here is your murder rate per 100,000. And so we did see that as well increase. And so in some of the instances, we might be seeing a decrease in the overall number of crimes, but some of the more severe crimes, we are seeing an increase. Going here, this is looking at for the murders that did occur by those alleged to be age 10 to 17. The larger number here you're going to see is the total number of murders each year. And then this is breaking it out by the type of weapon or force involved. And so as kind of the time goes on, we see that firearms are more and more frequently involved in these murders. Every murder in 2023 involved a firearm. And in 2024, it was 56 or 55 of the 56 murders. Whereas kind of going back to 2010, we did see more use of knives or blunt objects, things of that nature. And then looking at aggravated assault, we did see kind of an increase in 2022, 23. Looks like it might be shifting downward just a little bit. These are the number of aggravated assaults. This next slide is the rate of aggravated assaults among those age 10 to 17. One of the things we do talk about is that increase in weapons law violation and the use of firearms being involved with used by youth. However, one of the things we also point out is that even though we're seeing more and more youth use firearms, youth are still much more likely themselves to have a firearm used on them and be a victim of a firearm crime than they are to be a perpetrator. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and switch over real quick and just show y'all. Jerry mentioned we do budget recommendations. And so just wanted to highlight our 2027 budget recommendations. Let me switch share. Related to youth justice. And so that is one of the things we're seeing.
Holly, can I stop you for a second and ask for questions? Yeah. Also, I've got actually, it's a request. TJ emailed me last week, I think. He's working on the expansion. I can tell everybody he's working on the expansion on the or the construction of the new detention in Madison County. Can you send him that link with the heat maps for youth crime? Because
yeah, I can do that.
He even asked me last week about adding to his presentation. So I think those will be really helpful. So that's just before absolutely. I forget. Any questions in the room so far on the youth crime numbers and things? Sasha's raising her hand, Kylie.
Not so much, but well, kind of a question, comment. Is it safe to say that the gun crimes are kind of correlated with the permitless carry law? Only because, you know, as regional coordinators, we see the detention monitoring stats. And a lot of our, a lot of Shelby's, put it that way, is handguns, juvenile possession of handguns, and then there's a lot of auto theft as well. So that comes from you breaking into cars to get guns. So is it safe to say that there's a correlation? Those numbers spiked when the permitless carry went into act?
So there's a couple things we kind of overlaid. One of the changes, we saw that we've seen the increase over the last 10 years or so, one of the changes where we saw a pretty big increase. We haven't done all of the details to say this is, correlation, but when the guns and trunks law went into effect that allowed guns to be in cars, we did see an increase. One of the challenges with, we have some of the TBI data around thefts from motor vehicles, and we have seen a pretty big increase year over year in the number of firearms that are being stolen from vehicles. One of the challenges with that is a lot of times for the majority of that, we don't know the age of the perpetrator because it is being reported by the victim after it's happened. It's not that often that they know the age of the person who did it. So I would say with the TBI data for thefts from motor vehicles where the object stolen is a firearm, I think we only have the age for about 90 or 80, or sorry, we don't have the age for about 80 to 90% of those, but we have seen an increase over the decade as both the use of firearms in all youth crimes, and then also the theft of firearms from cars. And we did see that kind of start to increase when those laws around firearm storage was decreased.
I should say thank you. I think you're good, Kylie. No other
Okay,
questions. so far.
perfect. We will go, let me share my screen again, and we'll just go over our budget recommendations. So along those lines, as Sasha mentioned, we do monitoring, we keep track of youth justice data, all of those sorts of things. And so one of the things that we've noticed as we were looking at monitoring reports for why kids are being found. Also, my dog is barking. Let me see if I can get her to calm down for just a second. Okay. So one of the things when we're doing these monitoring reports is that we see the number of adolescent girls who are being, hold on. He does not like any sort of delivery driver or anyone approaching. So, so one of the things that we've noticed as we're doing these monitoring reports is an increase in the number of adolescent girls who are being brought into the juvenile justice system for a simple assaults. And so we've seen more and more a lot of the times when the children are brought in, it's a domestic situation. So it occurred at the home, a lot of times involving their parents or caregivers. And so with that, we are looking at creating a state-supported grant program to help communities implement evidence-based practices that address anger, aggression, and domestic violence education, targeting the growing trend of assault charges among adolescent girls. And so with this, what we see is still that boys make up the majority of the simple assault charges. However, the rate at which the number of charges associated with girls is growing is outpacing the boys. So we're seeing a larger percentage increase each year with the girls. And like I said, a lot of that seems to be targeted at home, domestic situations, potentially partner violence. And so looking at evidence-based practices to support that. Our other recommendation has to do with both child welfare and youth justice. There are a lot of places where a youth, once they are in DCS custody, can be held. And with that, there are different regulatory or licensing bodies or types of licenses that those facilities may have. And it can be tricky to figure out with each facility, whether that's a detention, any sort of long-term residential. Those are called childcare agencies in statute, and it can be difficult to figure out what type of license they have, what the license status is. And so recommending creating a publicly accessible database containing licensure information for all childcare agencies defined under TCA 37.5.501. Which that TCA 37.5.501 is specifying that these aren't childcare agencies as you would think of like a daycare. These are when they care for them for overnight 24-hour care. To enhance transparency and accountability in placements. So just understanding what license that facility has, what standards they're being held to. So our recommendation is that the database should include the entity responsible for licensing or approving the facility, the type of license held, current status of license or approval, date and type, and any adverse licensing action, the date of the most recent inspection, and the results of any inspection or corrective action. And so looking in August of 2025, there were approximately 195 congregate care facilities with an active placement of a DCS custodial youth. And then both Michigan and Wisconsin have these kind of online publicly available information about licensure status for their child welfare placements. So those are a couple of the things that we'll be working towards in the youth justice space this year. Any questions there?
Any questions in the room? I think you're good, Kylie.
Well, thank y'all so much. It's been great to be with you.
Anything else in the room? Okay, so Sasha noted the profile link online for everybody online. You'll see that link that you can go straight to our county profiles. As Kylie mentioned, for those of us in the room, you can get to our county profiles two ways now. You can go through the dashboard or you can go online to our regular county profile section. Those are printable. Use them for grants. Teresa mentioned grants earlier for our federal formula grants. So they're good for that. Any questions before Kylie jumps off? Thank you, Kylie. We appreciate you. Now we're a little bit ahead of schedule, but our updates. I know Dana's got an event coming up. Southwest has one event coming up. We partner with United Way of West Tennessee every year. So it's that time of the year for Alice Summit. Alice Summit will be coming up November 12th. So that'll be here in Jackson at the West Tennessee Ag Center. So registration will come out for it very shortly. Dana's got an event coming up. I'll let her come up and tell you about that. Remember, if you have anybody that wants to hear presentations on things like county profiles, holler at me and Dana because we can do, or Sasha, we can do short presentations on the county profiles or anything else on our website, because sometimes we know that when you go to our website, you can't always find stuff easily. And generally, we can help you find stuff that you might need. Remember the OJJDP compliance monitoring stuff. I will send out in an email, a follow-up email with all the links and everything where you can find that pretty easily. Also, remember when I send out the follow-up email, I always send out our juvenile justice directory. If you have had any changes, which I know a lot of our Haywood County, Anderson County have some updates. So, yep. So please update our juvenile justice directory that Dana and Sasha and I do, because that helps y'all be able to network with each other, ask each other questions and things like that. I always have, for our mental health folks that joined us, our DCS, who else do I have on it? Lifeliners, there's detention centers, all of that is on that there as well. So if our mental health, when you get the follow-up email, some of our newer mental health facilities are on there. If you don't see yourself on there, send me the information and I'll add those to it, because I try to keep it pretty consistent and updated. I try to update it quarterly as we have our roundtable. So remember to do that when I send, look for that link as well when I send it out. Dana, you want to go ahead and tell them?
Oh, well, one other thing I wanted to say is, we have just amazing data on our website and that we try to share, but also the Sycamore Institute. How many of y'all are familiar with the Sycamore Institute? Very few of you. I would encourage you to check out their website. They do a lot of special reporting about specific issues and concerns, and it's a nonpartisan kind of a think group. They also have now do the Kids Count report that we did for many, many years that they release every year as well, which compares Tennessee with the rest of the nation. So it's just another great source if you're writing a grant, doing community programming, but just they do free webinars. It's just an amazing website. And you can get on their email list. They have a newsletter. They will just sign you up. I mean, you'll have to sign up and
For
subscribe.
those of you that's on my email list, I actually include the Sycamore link if you haven't noticed.
But it's an amazing agency as well that produces some really high level thinking around and some policy kind of briefs around issues. They have a legislative staff also like us that really monitor the bills as well, and then they'll do some policies or policy statements around those kind of things. So we like our partners at the Sycamore Institute. So if you don't know about them, they're really good. So the Northwest Council's next upcoming event will be November the 14th. It is our Northwest Fall Conference and Provider Fair. One time a year, we invite all the providers to come in and set up. This year, all of us do surveys to kind of gauge what it is that people in our area need or asking for. I'm going to tell you, autism spectrum disorders, autism resources always ranks near the top because there are so few resources and a lot of misunderstanding. I had a long conversation with Kylie or a conversation with Kylie recently, and we were talking, and she said she also oversees and directs the Second Look Commission, which is those young people who have had more than one severe abuse or died as a result of a DCS referral. They were abused more than once and came to the attention of DCS. So one of the things she said that really got me thinking was that they found that some of the kids who were early on diagnosed with autism was that they were trauma. It was trauma, but once there was some mitigation and some therapy and all of that kind of stuff, then those kids began to shift. And so we were just talking, are there misdiagnoses? And so we're going to have some speakers around autism that afternoon. We will have Matt Marshall, Caitlin Mingle with United Way of West Tennessee will be there to talk about some of the ALICE data and talk about poverty. That is one of the things in all three of our regions that ranks near the top is those children who are living in poverty. And so we're going to look at some of those numbers, but not just look at the data. What can we do about it? What can be a response to it? So we'll have a couple other things, but that announcement has not gone out yet. We just finished one last week. I had my legislative forum last week. If you were lucky enough to be there, it was really good. We had 3 legislators to show up who were really committed and invested to hear what participants had to say. So the next, I will be sending out the November announcement very soon. Oh, I said the 14th.
It's that Friday. Yeah.
Is that the 15th?
14th. Okay.
Quit messing with me. November the 14th. That's right. Good. Thank you. So just so you know, we won't be together before then, but then my next event will be December the 5th. And that's our Stress Humor Conference that we do every year. And we already got our speaker. It's Dustin Keller. And if y'all, yeah, Dustin used to work for us, but he's gone off onto his own consulting group now. But he is funny, but he's a master level therapist. He was the director of Camelot. But he is just brilliant and insightful, but he is funny. So he's already booked for December the 5th. So y'all should be getting information. Sasha, you got anything coming up? Yeah. So she's going to have some things coming out as well. So
So make sure you're signed up for, so make sure you're signed up for our email lists. So you'll get those announcements. Remember, 3-hour participant certificate will come with the follow-up too. So make sure you signed in and your email is legible for me. Also, there should be a QR code on your desk, on your table. If online, there's a link. Also, there's paper copies floating around too in your packets. But if you can get on, I would appreciate if you could scan this QR code because it's so much easier for me to compilate the data. That is our survey for the roundtable. So you can talk, you can do the survey for us.
does anybody in your county have an event coming up? Maybe it's a CASA event, maybe it's a fundraiser, maybe it's a fun festival going on in your county that y'all would like to invite people to, because sometimes people don't know what other fun things there are to do in other counties. I will tell you, the Real Foot Arts and Crafts Festival will be coming the first weekend in October. I think it's October 3rd, 4th, and 5th. If you've never been, it's amazing. It is amazing.
In Benton County this weekend on Saturday, Eva Beach is having their festival with like music and vendors and crafts and things like
Somebody else say something? So yeah, we want to share the good, positive things too. Sometimes this gets pretty heavy, don't it? It gets pretty heavy when we think about, the populations that we work with and the requirements that go along with and the paperwork that goes along with all of, you just want to go help people, but you've got to take that briefcase full of paperwork and make sure you dot all the I's and cross all the T's. And, sometimes that gets long and hard. Yes, Sasha.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So compilations, that is the TCA updated compilations that our courts, our judges receive, and then some other people. We have very limited copies, but they will be coming out. They've been shipped, but now we don't know what that means. Y'all got to understand. Sometimes that takes a month. Sometimes it takes 6 weeks. And if they'll get to the right place at the right address, they struggle. They really struggle. But we're hoping they will be here at the end of October. So we know, the laws were passed in July, and it takes that long for LexisNexis to put that book together and update it. So the courts just be looking. We'll be coming to see y'all.
And those books are heavy, y'all. Got a couple of announcements online. Stacy Fernandez with Perimeter Behavioral Health shared that Jackson, remember, they have a new adolescent expansion So she's having a community Q&A on September 25th from 5 to 7 p.m. at Perimeter Behavioral Hospital. She sent me a flyer, so I'll add that to our follow-up email. Chester County's got a barbecue. I can't believe Mia didn't mention it, but Katrina did online. And I'm just going to go ahead and say Treva shouted out, thank you for TCCY's work. So, toot my own horn. But anybody else got anything else in the room or online? So we're ahead of schedule, y'all. Everybody in the room, pizza is about ready. So if y'all want to get some lunch, everybody online, again, I'm sorry, you're going to have to fend for yourself on lunch. But thank y'all, and be looking for that follow-up email. Make sure everybody in the room and online, make sure you signed in with your email addresses so I can send you the follow-up email. Thank you. Please get some pizza. Y'all, please.